Good evening. Welcome to the West Jordan Planning Commission meeting for April 21st, 2015. 5 of our members are present tonight. Commissioner Sikoski is excused. Looking at our agenda for the evening, the first item is our consent calendar, which is the minutes from our April 7th, 2015 meeting.
I'll move to approve.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Jacob, second by Commissioner Quinney. Any discussion of the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
5-0.
Thank you. Can't count tonight. 5-0. We have 2 public hearings tonight that have been summarized on a single staff report as they all relate to the same item. It's the Maverick Highlands Subdivision and Development Plan, 7800 South and Loop Road, considering a preliminary subdivision plat, a development plan, and a preliminary site plan in an SC2 zone. Maverick Incorporated and Peterson Development are the applicants. Is the applicant present? The time is now yours, sir.
Good evening, Don Lillquist with Maverick Convenience Stores. I'm sorry, I was thinking there was going to be a staff presentation, not go right to me, so I apologize for not being prepared. Maverick is proposing, well, I'm speaking on the Maverick Convenience Store, not the subdivision. So I'll talk on that part of it. If you want to hear about the subdivision, Paul is here to talk about that.
So I'm sorry, the Maverick Convenience Store will be, because we have it listed as 2 separate items, we need to hear the Maverick subdivision and development plan before we hear the site plan, since it would need to be 2 separate hearings.
We do need 2 separate hearings.
Yes, we do need 2 separate hearings.
Very well then. I apologize. We'll have to mix this up a little bit then.
I thought it said that it was going to be combined into one.
Well, that's how our staff report reads. So maybe I made an assumption that I shouldn't have then. So we'll flip this just a little bit. We'll hear the subdivision first.
Good evening. My name is Paul Stringham, 2535 Valley View Avenue, Salt Lake City. I work with Peterson Development, and we have been working for a number of months with Maverick and also with Anderson Wallen. Our engineer is David Anderson, for the subdivision here on this property to creating the subdivision, allowing for Maverick to go in on this particular site. We have been working with staff, and we appreciate the relationship that we have with staff. They've been very cooperative, and we have received approvals from staff as far as the access coming in, going east, just east of the Mountain View corridor for access to come into the site of Maverick. But anyway, I'll let Don talk about that. But this is the subdivision as what's been drawn up and proposed. I met with David Anderson the other day at Anderson Wallen, and he feels at this point that everything has been submitted properly. We've exchanged red lines, and that we are ready to go. So I'm certainly here to address any questions, any particular engineering problems or questions. I wouldn't say problems, but I think we resolved them. I may have a problem with, but the overall site plan and or the overall subdivision, I'm certainly here to support.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner Jacob.
Thank you, Chairman. I have one question, and that is on criteria 2 in the subdivision findings of fact. It talks about safe pedestrian circulation, and I was just wondering what the plans are subdivision-wide. I don't remember between the roundabout and 5600 West if there's a sidewalk on the south side of the road there or not. This doesn't necessarily all apply to this specific parcel that we're talking about, but I think the pedestrian circulation is important on a broader scale, mainly because, I mean, we had 2 people killed in December because they were walking back from Smith's across the road that didn't have a sidewalk. So just looking at this at a broader scale, is there a sidewalk already from?
Yeah, not already, but to my understanding, Don, I'm looking at you, but I believe that we are putting a sidewalk there on the south side of the street. I'm quite confident of it. Staff, if you have any input, that would be great too. But yes, I believe there is a sidewalk there.
Okay, because I just am concerned when there are streets they go somewhere and there's not a sidewalk that goes there too. Because,
As we are concerned about that, safety is paramount.
right. I would love to see the sidewalk extending west from this as well, all the way up to at least Mountain View corridor where the pedestrian multi-use path is, if not all the way up to the Oaks and the apartments. I mean, all the way up the hill. But we can only take one step at a time. I just don't want to have another situation happen like what happened in December with the Johnson family, who happens to be my neighbors. So.
Sure.
Wanted to put that out there. So do we know, staff, as far as between the roundabout and 56, is there sidewalk, plans for sidewalk? Either one is good.
As part of the subdivision approval, during the final subdivision approval, they would be required, at least on the south side of 7800 South, to install the sidewalks.
Okay, and that's all the way, because that's part of this subdivision. It's not necessarily part of this particular parcel that we're subdividing today. Is that right?
I don't know, is this more of a site plan issue than it is a subdivision issue? I'm just asking the question. I don't know.
Well, for me, it's a subdivision issue because the subdivision, if we can show the zoning and land use map, the broader picture that has the subject site outlined, you can see the current parcel goes all the way from west of the power corridor all the way to 5600 west. And so that's the stretch I'm concerned about, is mainly between the roundabout and 5600 west, because there will be people from the apartments coming up the hill to the Maverick, and the neighborhood to the south coming up 5600 west and up to the Maverick. So that's the stretch I'm concerned about. It's obviously not on this slide.
As we go further east on the development, and you have that right there,
Right.
as we develop that property as market demands, we certainly will have sidewalks there.
Right, as that property is developed, but this property is developed in almost kind of a leapfrog fashion as far as the south side of the street is concerned. That's where my concern is because there's nothing between where the Maverick is going in and 5600 west on the south side of the road.
Right.
So that property's not being developed now, so I would assume that property's not going to get a sidewalk now until it's developed,
Yeah,
which gives us the safety issue that I'm concerned with.
well, and the only way that without a development occurring on 5600 West, that the city they couldn't compel this developer at this time to do it. They can only require sidewalk on the property they're impacting.
On the property that's being developed?
Yeah, on the property that's being developed. Now, if the city felt it was a safety issue, they could install the sidewalks, but this time, until the rest of that commercial development occurs, it's just going to be a little bit piecemeal until all of the development occurs. A lot of the people may have to go across the street to the Smith side or across 5600 on the east side where there is a sidewalk. Now I realize that's inconvenient, but the one thing about 56 going south is there are some homes to walk to, a little bit down the road.
Right.
But yeah, the sidewalk and improvements will just have to wait until the properties are developed. So
that is my concern. Thank you for answering. Between everybody.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Any other questions specific to the subdivision plat and development plan?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So hang on, to keep us on topic here and on our agenda, we'll open the public hearing related to this item and then jump to the next item there. So if anybody would like to comment on this particular item, we're currently reviewing the preliminary subdivision plat and the development plan, which is item number 2 on our agenda. The time is now yours. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on that. And I think we'll save our discussion for this as a whole, and now we'll bring it to our third item.
Wow. Nice. That's good.
Good evening. Don Lillquist with Maverick Convenience Stores, 880 West Center Street, North Salt Lake, Utah. What I've got on the easel is just a colored elevation of the new building that we are proposing for the site there. It's a little different design than what you've seen before. We don't have any of these buildings currently in operation. Our first one broke ground about a month ago in Kaysville. If we get approved here, this will probably be one of the first 10 stores that has this new design. If you're familiar with our old stores, we have a center entrance door, and you go out from there, and the cash dispensers or the cash registers are in the middle of the store. These new designs will have 2 doors, 2 entrances, and 2 exits, with the cash registers right as you walk in the door and walk out the door. So it's a little different design. You also see the timber frame feature on the front of the building. There are a lot of differences in this new design. They've got something called BTO, build to order sandwiches, so you now can go in and you can order a sandwich made to order, how you like it. So just some different things that are going on here. We as well have been working with staff on approval of this store and the site plan, and we have provided all the drawings and done a lot of changes to the site plan that they have requested. And we are basically in compliance with the recommendation of the staff, with one exception. And that exception is the recommended condition of approval, item number 1. And that item reads, an easement with Pacific Corp must be established before final site plan approval in order to allow landscaping maintenance and access along the east side of the substation property. Now, we have been working with staff, and they have requested that we provide a landscaping buffer between, behind the store. And we have been working diligently with Utah or Rocky Mountain Power to obtain that easement. But there's no guarantee that we will get that easement. I spoke as late as today, about at 10 o'clock, with Henry Sosi with Rocky Mountain Power, who is going to meet with our surveyors out on site to have the site marked so that he could see exactly where our wall was going to be in relation to their fence around the substation. There is approximately 10 feet of property between the back of our building and the fence, the back of our building, which is the property line between us and Rocky Mountain Power, and the fence line. So if Rocky Mountain Power approves it and gives us that 5-foot easement for landscaping, then we'll be just fine. But I would hate to see this approval conditioned upon us obtaining a landscape easement for Rocky Mountain Power, because if they say no, then this project is dead. And I would like to refer to the city's code, section 13-8-21, ease of removal and prevention of graffiti. It says conditions of development approval regarding graffiti. And it says in approving site plans, conditional use permits, variances, or other similar land entitlements, the city shall impose all of the following conditions. And there are 2 conditions listed. Number 1, supply city with matching color formula, which we would be more than happy to do. The second item is developer to remove graffiti within 48 hours, which we would also be willing to do. Further down in this, section B says design of potential graffiti attracting surfaces. Now, this doesn't say design of the building or landscaping or anything else. This strictly relates to design of potential graffiti attracting surfaces. And it says 1, use of protective coating. I don't know if there's a protective coating that would work on the type of material that we're using for the building, but we would look into that, and if it's available, we would use that. Number 2, use of additional lighting. We have offered to put additional lighting as well as additional security cameras along the back of the store to monitor that, and we would also put a television monitor at the cash dispenser or the cash registers so that our store clerks would be able to monitor that. If there was anybody back there, they could immediately call 911, get somebody out there. Number 3 is use of non-solid fencing. There is not going to be any fencing along the back of the store since it's on the property line. Use of landscape foliage to cover large, expansive walls. Now, this doesn't talk about the 5-foot landscape buffer. It's talking about landscape foliage that would grow up on the wall of the building. I don't know if any of you have ever had ivy grow on a wall that you own, of a home that you own, but it's not conducive to longevity of your building material. The 5th one is use of architectural design to break up long, continuous walls or solid areas. And we have provided that in our site plan. Our elevations that we have provided have broken up that back wall with some columns and some other details so that it's not going to be as easy to put graffiti on that wall as it would just a long, straight wall. So other than that one condition of approval, we concur with the staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacob.
Just a question, would it be possible to, and I don't know what the easement or what the specifications are for setbacks here, would it be possible to move the building 5 feet to the east?
Let me show that. I've got it. I just have it. So may I approach?
Sure.
So this is the site plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very similar to what we have there.
It is. As you can see, this is the property line. This is the fence line with Rocky Mountain Power.
Right.
So we're building right there. Our normal drive aisles are 42 feet between the store and the gas canopy and 40 feet between the gas canopy and the curb. As you'll notice, this curb angles and turns around, so we get down to a pinch point of 31 feet here.
Mm-hmm.
So we've already gone 4 feet shorter than we normally do in this area, and we can't go any further that way because we get this pinch point, then the fuel trucks can't go around.
Roger.
So the building really is in the optimal location, and really the only location we could and maintain good circulation.
Perfect. So it does have to be where,
Yes.
yeah, okay. That's kind of what I thought.
Commissioner Heiner.
Thank you. Is the footprint of this building bigger than your typical buildings that you have now?
Yeah, slightly larger. Our typical store was about 4,650. This store is going to be a little over 5,000 square feet, just slightly larger.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions for the applicant? Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And now we'll turn it over to staff. Ms. Larson.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think that the applicant reviewed the proposal very well. Just as a comment about the landscaping along the west side of the property, the condition number 1 for the preliminary site plan approval. It was staff's intent, and the applicant did address this. The intent of the condition was due to a concern that staff had about graffiti tagging. That the initial proposal showed a 2-foot setback from that west property line, and it was determined that 2 feet wasn't enough to maintain landscaping in order to prevent some of those graffiti tags. So the requirement came as moving the building further to the west so that there would be a 0 lot line setback on the west property, and to allow for maintenance on that landscaping in order to avoid as many graffiti tags as what staff is kind of foreseeing on it.
Any questions for staff? So how much does this impact, if we remove condition 1, how much does that impact the ability of the city to enforce that graffiti monitoring and maintenance and?
Well, we still have standards in the city code that allows us to review it during the final site plan submittal.
But at this point, would it still be your recommendation that we maintain condition 1?
We would still recommend that we maintain condition number 1 on the preliminary site plan.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Pack?
Just wondering if we might make an adjustment in the language then on recommendation number 1, an easement with Pacific Court must be established. Should we put every effort must be sought after? Because
It's a little arbitrary though.
I'm understanding, yeah, I'm kind of
One
trying to figure
suggestion
out
is
if they can't get the easement, then where do we go from there? What's the recourse?
we could bring this back for final approval with the planning
Okay.
commission. So
That's what I
they
was
could
thinking.
receive preliminary approval and they could move ahead and then work with staff and Rocky Mountain Power
Okay.
and to try to mitigate this condition, because ultimately, if it is tagged and graffiti, it will be upon the business owner to remove it. It's not the city's responsibility necessarily to go, well, at all, to go out there and remove it. So it will be, it will be their burden to remove it, and so they need to at least make plans on how they're going to do that. But I would leave the condition as it is, and then we could bring this back for final when they're ready for that, because this does seem to be I don't think it's something that we should overlook, necessarily. But the applicant sounds like he's working with Rocky Mountain Power, but nobody at this point knows whether they're going to cooperate or not. And so you could do that. So that's just one suggestion.
Commissioner Pack?
Great, thank you. Yes, I think that's a good win-win where we're saying it must be there, but then if something happens where it must not, it can come back. And that way it safeguards both the applicant and the city.
Maybe we could add that as a condition 5, that if the easement cannot be obtained, then it comes back to the planning commission for final site plan approval.
But aren't we back in the same spot again?
Well, then we could ask for.
Then we can reevaluate it based on the current status of that discussion between the applicant and Rocky Mountain Power.
Great.
Okay, before we continue our discussion, we'll open this item up to the public if there is anybody who would like to comment on this specific aspect of it, which is the preliminary site plan at this point.
Yes, I'm trying to understand the process and in the discussion here, and certainly respect the intent and the objective of seeing that graffiti is mitigated and taken care of. I mean, I've owned property myself in an area in another state where there was a graffiti issue, and as a property owner, I was very responsible in seeing that the tagging was removed immediately, because if not, then it would just invite more tagging. And I'm absolutely confident of my research, and I'm on the business side of things, of doing business with different retailers and convenience stores in this case. And I don't know of a finer group than Maverick that would stick and stand by their word. They're a local company, regional company, and they are absolutely committed to maintain these kind of structures and these buildings. I don't know of a better operator than Maverick. And when they tell us all that they will make that commitment as an operator to make sure that they will mitigate and resolve the tagging as best as possible and removing it immediately, you can put a condition in there within a certain day or hours or whatever it might be. I am confident that they will do this. That's point number 1. Number 2 is Peterson. We have been involved in the project across the street for years. I've been working with Smiths for 7 years to get Smiths out there. It's our goal to try to get a shovel digging every 6 months out in this area. That is extremely challenging. This is still a green area. There are antelope in the field still. And to get retailers there in our buildings is a challenge. And we've spent more money on this project across the street than we have on any other project. We have decided as a company to spend whatever it takes to make this a Class A project for the entrance of West Jordan. And I don't think anyone would contend that. And I don't want to belabor that point. But we have an operator here tonight that is willing to make commitments to make this work. And you're out there right next to a substation that has you can see it visually. And I can tell you that the enhancement of Maverick right there would certainly enhance the appearance of this intersection or this area of the roundabout. And it would certainly help us as a developer to show and to witness to other potential uses that, activity is happening. It's not easy. And concessions have been given to our existing building across the street. We've got 2 retail buildings over there to get the one leased. There's no activity yet on that second building. And we're going to have a fountain live in the next 30 days. We want development. And we would hope, and I'm not asking for favors, but we would hope that you would consider this, because I am absolutely confident with who Maverick is and their intent and their ability to get things done right. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on this? We'll then close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for further discussion. Commissioner Jay.
Thank you, sir. I believe that condition number 1 on the site plan could be replaced with something more specific. If the intention here is to mitigate graffiti, a landscape easement is not the only way of doing that. It's not even really a way of doing that I can really see. Other than it allows you to plant some pyracantha or something with big old thorns if you wanted to keep people away from the back of your building. But I don't think that's the intent either. I think if we put in some other language, and for the record, I had a feeling this graffiti ordinance would bite us in the butt one day. If we put in some other language regarding the graffiti ordinance into that condition 1, remove the condition 1 regarding an easement and landscape maintenance and change it to something relating to abating graffiti somehow, a company policy that they write down and they show us that they have, or whatever. Something about graffiti abatement. If that's the real goal of this condition 1, then let's address the problem that's the problem and not try and address a problem that sort of has to do with the problem. Does that make sense?
Well, that's already a given in city code that they have to address the graffiti.
That's what I'm saying. It's like finding B almost. So I'm in favor of removing condition 1.
What are the negative implications then of there being no easement across that property?
Well, the ease of access to get to the back of their building, so. Because it's a 0 lot line development. Now, whether they can go onto Rocky Mountain Power's property to do that, then, and I guess there are ways to mitigate that, remove, it's still up to them to do it. And this landscape easement was a way to assure that they have some way of getting back there to remove it.
So without
But
the easement,
it also allows the bad guys to get back there too. Yeah. And
so without the easement, they have no access to the back of the building
the back
to
of the
address.
property, yeah. So. And generally on these 0 lot line things, they're within, and at least in commercial, there's much larger commercial developments, so there's easements and circulation around it, where this one's a little unique. It has a utility structure right next to it, and so.
Commissioner Heiner, did you have a comment?
Just so that I understand it, there's the building, and then that's the property line.
Right.
Is that correct?
Commissioner Pack?
I'm grateful for Maverick doing business in West Jordan, and I understand that they're saying they're making a commitment to handling the situation, and certainly that's commendable. I'm just trying to figure out how we, as a planning commission, we've got to do decisions based on facts, and it needs to address standards. No matter what anybody's good intentions are, we've got to, follow the code and facts. I'm just trying to get my head around how we can make it win-win. We need the easement so that they can get back there to do what they're saying they're going to do, which is clean up the graffiti. They're saying they clean up the graffiti anyway, but technically they can't do that if they don't have the easement.
But how are they?
It's a rock and a hard place. No, please.
How are they going to maintain it without that easement? Or if there's a problem without the easement, how are they going to get back there to do any maintenance, whether it be graffiti or just wear and tear?
How are you going to build the building and paint the wall? I mean, if it's trespassing across that property line, how are you going to build the building and paint the wall?
Yeah, my point exactly. How are you going to get back
I
there?
mean, and that's a legitimate question, I think. I mean, if it's building the building and painting the wall, can that happen without the easement?
Yeah, I'm sure they would have to get agreements from the adjacent property owner, so, but
Same boat.
now they are allowed to build on the property line in this zone. But what we don't want is to make it look like the city is compelling someone to go on someone else's property. And so, which we're not, but it will meet the code by being on, the property line. So but they will have to get agreements for construction and that type of thing.
So we have the option to address it tonight, or we can kick it down the road and bring it back for final, contingent on further discussion between the applicant and Rocky Mountain Power. Commissioner Pack?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, which is my consideration too. I usually hate kicking things down the road, but there might not be anything we need to kick if we get the easement. So maybe we do keep recommendation number 1 for condition approval in there, and then if it might be a non-issue, if it does become an issue, then it comes back to us, and then we address it then.
I agree.
But in that case, I think we need to have an idea of how we move forward if it comes back without that easement for final. Because then we're in the same exact bucket we're in right now. Boat. Same exact boat. Or bucket. Whatever's kicked down the road. Yeah, because if we don't have a plan for how we're going to address it that time, then we're sitting here in the same boat and say, okay, well, congratulations, you've done more work and you still can't put in your building. So I think addressing it now is just as effective as addressing it at final, at least with the contingency plan.
What's the answer today then?
42.
All right.
Not sure what the question is.
I don't have a contingency plan. It doesn't sound like there is one shy of the easement.
But the problem has to be solved down the road for anyone else who is on a zero lot line situation, for any other property owner on that on the other side. Are we going to require, or do we have to require an easement on every zero lot line property? Say, for instance, this wasn't Pacific Power, maybe it was somebody else, and they wanted to do that on the zero lot line. How would they do it if we don't do something?
Well, I don't know. I can think of 3 commercial projects in this city that have been built for the last 20, 30 years to have back walls on zero property, and I don't know what their agreement is with adjacent property owners to maintain the back of their issue or their property. So I don't have a good question for you, or a good answer for your question is what I'm saying. What Nanette was addressing is a very specific part of the code is how is somebody going to address graffiti? How is it going to be removed? Because that is a issue that makes the city less attractive if it's left for a long time. Now, I'm not saying Maverick is going to do that because I don't think they are. But you know, the whole reason for the easement was for maintenance of the rear of the building.
Maintenance of the back of the building,
Yeah.
period, and or because of the
Primarily
possible
for-
agreement?
Primarily for
tag.
graffiti removal, yeah, and that's it. So,
Commissioner Back.
Thank you. So we can't just move things over. I know we have that pinch point we're talking about. The store's bigger than the average Maverick. We can't make any consideration on squeezing it down a couple feet. Or, you know, I know we've already had that presentation. But if this is bigger than the average Maverick, I mean, I know you have to then go through all architecture. I'm just brainstorming here. Why can't we just move it off the zero line?
That was a good question.
To give a little bit more room there, even though we have the pinch point, well, then can't we shrink other things down? And we're just talking about a foot or two to get someone back there to clean it up.
and, you know, it's a substation in back of it, okay? And it probably will always be a substation. Now, I don't know, I haven't been in the talks with the applicant with Rocky Mountain Power. They might not have a problem allowing them to access the back of their building on their property. They just may not be interested in landscaping because they may feel like that becomes their maintenance issue. And so they may be able to resolve it with a simple agreement that they can go onto their property and maintain the rear of their building. And that may be more palatable to Rocky Mountain Power. I don't know. Like I said, I'm just, you know, blowing smoke in the wind right now because I haven't been in that agreement. Maybe the applicant can address better on what the talks have been with Rocky Mountain Power. You know, and if they're willing to give Maverick an agreement, maybe that's good enough, you know, to resolve this issue. Maybe you want to ask him. I don't know. So.
Commissioner Back.
Thank you. So again, with the idea of kicking the can down the road, not making the applicant do any more work, but how long would it take to contact Pacific Court to get this to see if it's actually going to be an issue? Because I understand we don't want the applicant to feel like they need to do more work, but then we're still in the same boat. I mean, what's the process? How long would this take? I know it's probably more than just a phone call.
Well, you mentioned he was in discussion with them this morning, so.
Right, I'm just thinking, can we, I mean, I'm not saying to table the whole thing, I'm just saying if we're just waiting on a response from Pacific Court, can't we just wait on the response from Pacific Court? Bring this back next time, the applicant doesn't have to do any more work.
Other than continue to negotiate with Pacific Court, adding a fifth condition of bringing this back for final subdivision plat would give us that time for them to work that out.
And the applicant wouldn't have to go through any more money of reapplying, or
No.
we're just continuing this
Yeah.
conversation, not trying to set them back.
Well, we're approving preliminary tonight. Typically, final is handled at an administrative level.
Mm-hmm.
We're just bumping that from administrative to us as an option.
I still think, you know, ceteris paribus, all things being equal, let's do that and just move it, even though we don't have a clear-cut, decisive judgment call on what to do if we don't have the easement. Again, it might be a non-issue, and we're just waiting to hear back from them.
But if not, then we're dead in the water. Or the applicant's dead in the water and they've...
But we're not asking them to do anything more right now.
No, but based on this, if they don't get that easement, then they can't get an approval. Is that the way this is set up now?
The way it's set up, yes.
So can we just continue this at our next meeting and not make the decision tonight that would bind them and handcuff them into not being able to do it because condition number 1 wasn't given to them? I mean, is that a horrible thing to continue this in 2 weeks, or to table it so that we're not handcuffing them saying we're going to pass it with number 1 or strike number 1 because we really feel number 1 should be there?
Can I make a suggestion?
Please.
You could just strike number 1 and have them come up with an agreement or some kind of plan how they're going to remove graffiti from the building that's submitted with the final submission. And staff need to do that.
They can hang a repeller
I'll
off the
take
roof
repel off
and
the wall
spray
and
it.
back to it.
That's right.
Seriously, someone
You know,
repelling for.
that's the problem. with other properties down the road too, is everybody gonna have to rappel off their wall to get back to maintaining zero lot?
I don't think anybody's repelling. I think everybody's
No, I
walking around the
understand.
back of their building.
I'm being facetious, but it still blocks
Yeah.
someone else from doing anything without an easement and or an agreement, I suppose. And maybe that's the way it's been done in the past, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, but the comment was made earlier that from a city perspective, we don't want to look like we're compelling somebody to trespass.
So I would just make them come up with a plan they submit with the final submittal.
So that leaves some room
Yeah.
to whether that be an easement or whether that be some other type of legal agreement. We can leave that between the applicant and Pacific Corp to work out and give us final approval.
Or just the plan. I really don't think that Pacific Corp's that onerous that they're going to say absolutely don't set foot on this because
Well, I don't think most people would be.
yeah, and so I think it's workable, you know. So.
Commissioner Jacob?
Yeah, I just was gonna take a stab at rewriting, condition 1 with exactly what Ray just said. And my proposal, I mean, I don't know if we wanna tackle this now or when the motion's made, but this way at least we have something to talk about, and then we can either table it for 2 weeks or.
Well, throw out what you got, let's discuss it.
So my rewording would be to say a written agreement with Pacific Corp must be established before final site plan approval in order to allow access to the rear of the building along the east side of the substation property. So removing landscape maintenance, because if Pacific Corp thinks that means they have to plant flowers, we don't want Pacific Corp to think they have to plant flowers. Or thorny rose bushes or whatever. So just saying it's specifically for maintenance of the east side of the building.
Mr. Thorpe, do you see any concerns with that setup?
No, I think that's a good idea.
Right. So,
And then we could add final approval as a condition 5.
I think it should come back for final approval so we can look at that. Very well, any other discussion?
This is
And this was only 1 out of the 3.
3 motions from now, so.
That is the last one. Any other discussion on any of the motions?
Oh, it's the second one. Development plan is last one.
Well, I entertain a motion from somebody on beginning at the preliminary subdivision.
My only concern on the subdivision again is the sidewalks, but I made that clear.
That's something we can enforce. But
It's in the code.
Commissioner Pack.
great, so starting on page 9, motion recommendations. I move that based on the positive findings set forth in the staff report and information received during this meeting, that the Planning Commission approve Maverick Highlands subdivision for the property located at 5701 West, 7800 South in an SC2 zoning district with the 2 conditions listed in the staff report.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Pack, second by Commissioner Laws. Any discussion of the motion? Commissioner Jacob.
Short of requiring sidewalks all the way to 5600 West and or the 6700 West in the other direction or Mountain View Corridor or wherever, short of requiring sidewalks to go in, can we or could we put a condition on this of saying no pedestrian access, put a sign at 5600 West that says no pedestrian access, because that is in this subdivision. Saying no pedestrian access on this side of the street, use sidewalk on the other side, or a sidewalk closed sign, or something that we can put there so that at least we try to keep people from walking up the side of the road where there's no sidewalk.
There is sidewalk on the other side of the street.
On the north side of the street.
Yeah, and
Right.
so
That's what I mean.
I don't know if putting a sign up is just going to necessarily do much good. Because there's not a sidewalk there to begin with, so I think they're going to recognize that.
Well, what I mean is it removes.
Use other side.
It removes maybe a little bit of a liability, because in the one hand, I think I hear rumors that the city is being sued because there wasn't a sidewalk on 7800 South and 2 people died.
Well, I'm sure they are.
I'm sure they are too. So at least we can say, hey, we put a sign up that said don't walk it. Maybe the city can put that up. We don't
On private
require
property.
developers to put it up. Required development, whatever, you can put it on the curb so that it's on the right of ways and put it somewhere. What's the equivalent to a red curb for a sidewalk? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there as an idea. I would just like to see something done so that we can mitigate a future tragedy. And granted, they had some negligence in their tragedy as well, but.
I don't know if that's something that we can address, but that might be something worth taking to the two city councilmen that border those areas for them to address the city staff.
Not a bad idea. Okay. That's my only discussion to the motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
What was that?
Would you like to handle the preliminary site plan? Since you had the notes?
Well, development plan, second, is it not?
No, the site plan.
Site plan? Okay, sure.
Page 10.
Yep.
Did I skip one in the middle there?
Nope, all right.
Go for it.
I'll go ahead and make a motion on the site plan. That I move that we approve the Maverick Convenience Store site plan located 5701 West, 7800 South, preliminary site plan, excuse me, in the SC2 zone with conditions 1 through 4. Add in condition 5 that the final approval of the site plan is brought back to the Planning Commission, and modifying condition 1. Do I need to restate it? Sure. Modifying condition 1 to read, a written agreement with Pacific Court must be established before the final site plan approval in order to allow access to the rear of the building along the east side of the substation property.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Jacobs, second by Commissioner Laws. Any discussion of the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Commissioner Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that based on the positive findings set forth in the staff report and information received during this meeting, that the Planning Commission approve the development plan of Maverick Convenience Store located at 5701 West, 7800 South in an SC2 zoning district.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Pack, second by Commissioner Queen. Any discussion to the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. That concludes our agenda for the evening. Anything else from the commission? Commissioner Pack.
Just quickly, if I may, I think tonight was a perfect example of, I really enjoy reading the planning magazine that we get on a monthly basis, where on page 64, if any of the commissioners are interested, it talks about findings of fact for planning commissions on how you can talk for hours and hours, but then in the minutes, if it's not noted that there's a critical connection between facts and standards, you might be seen as being arbitrary or unfair. It says planning commissions that have best interest in the communities in heart. However, it's not enough to work hard and have your heart in the right place. We need to do more than decide whether we like a project. Planning commissions decide on careful consideration of facts whether the planning commission should conclude it's applicable to the community policies and standards if they're being met, fact-based determinations, not emotional or personal stories. So I thought that's a really interesting article, and they even posed the question, what is planning? It's creating a sense of place, making connections, building resiliency. It's about people, the community members, the officials, and all those who support planning efforts. And last but certainly not least, the planners who crafted the vision that create communities of lasting value. And then for staff, kind of an anecdotal message on page 72, if any of you get a chance to read that, it says the planners lament night meetings. And then this planner from he's been in Wyoming and Colorado, he just counts up all the hours that he's spent off the clock. He figures he spent like 3 hours at night working off the books, but he doesn't recall taking 3 years of comp time. And just all the time that our wonderful staff puts into making the city a great place, as well as my fellow planning commissioners and volunteers. Thank you to everyone for working together and synergy for the betterment of our community. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else? I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Anybody opposed to that? We stand adjourned until May 5th, 2015.